you will have to pay your own medical insurance for the first few years. And if you've got a life-threatening disease, we're very sorry, but it's the Australian Health Service, and it's for Australian people, and not for the rest of the world. And the Australians say, if you've got a criminal record, which is funny when you think about it, isn't it? If you've got a criminal record, we don't want you. Isn't that exactly what we should do? Shouldn't we take bright people, good people from all over the world who haven't got criminal records in limited numbers? Then immigration would be a positive and a good thing for Britain. And we've got to get that right. And while I'm on positives and negatives, this is the first general election that's ever been fought under a fixed-term parliament. In the past, you never quite knew when an election might be. It was the power of the Prime Minister to choose the date. These guys chose May the 7th, 2015, 5 years ago. And as a result of that, on January the 2nd, the new year had started, and the artillery war between Labour and Conservative began on that day. And the narrative is quite simple. The Labour narrative is that if the Conservatives get back in, they'll destroy the National Health Service and there'll be no healthcare in Britain in 5 years' time. And the Conservative narrative against Labour is, if Labour get back in, they'll bankrupt the country. And I struggled on January the 2nd to hear what either of the parties was actually standing for. It's American-style negative campaigning. It is throwing abuse at each other. And that abuse, it would appear, is now going to be levelled at me. Which is no great surprise. And it comes in the shape of Roger Gale today. So, I'm sorry, Chairman, Sir Roger Gale. Let me get that right. After what happened in Paris last week, and what we saw in Belgium last night, and specimens of which we saw on the London Underground back in 2005, I did speak in the European Parliament on Monday, and I said that to get things right for the future, we have first to admit the terrible mistakes we've made in the past. And our politicians need to be honest and to admit that through open-door mass immigration, through not doing security checks on the people coming to Britain, through a lack of integration, so great have been the numbers, through our turning a blind eye to hate preachers, saying things which any one of us would be banged up within 24 hours for saying, for allowing all this to happen, we are ourselves partly culpable for these awful things that are going on. And we have to recognise that sadly, small though it may be, we do have a fifth column living within our countries in Europe that actually want to change and bring down our way of life. And that we need immediately to start being more assertive. It's back to the chairman's point about pride, actually. We've got to start being more assertive and saying we have a Christian, Judeo-Christian culture in our countries. We welcome all different groups, but this is the law of our land, and this is how people have to live. And until we have the courage to do that, we haven't got a chance of putting the problem right. That is what I said in the European Parliament on Monday of this week, and I said it from the heart, and I meant it. Now, Sir Roger says, in today's Standard Extra, he says, let me be crystal clear. I do not wish to be re-elected with the support of anyone who espouses the views expressed in the hours following the murderous attacks of the French magazine people in Charlie Hebdo in Paris by the current UKIP leader. So if you agree with what I just said, the Conservative Party don't want you to vote for them because they think everything is fine and dandy. He goes on to be really quite abusive about me. Well, you know what? Whether it's Roger Gale or whether it's the Conservative and Labour candidates in Thanet South, whether it's Mr Cameron, Mr Miliband, or what's left of Mr Clegg, whatever happens over these next 4 months, whether I'm in Westminster, whether I'm on telly, whether I'm in the streets here in Thanet, I am not going to say anything negative on an individual basis about anybody else. I'm bored. Is what UKIP is for, Mr. Chairman. We are for being a self-governing democracy. We are for proper control of our borders. We are for giving industries like our fishing industry the chance to actually go out and make some money. We are for the 4.9 million, I bet there are some in this room, the 4.9 million men and women that run small businesses or act as sole traders whose lives are made a complete misery by all sorts of quangos and red tape and rules and regulations, and we'll try and lift the burden off their backs. We are for an education system that gives kids around the rest of the country the opportunity that they have in Kent of selective education. We are for, at school, those kids who are not academic, from the age of 14, being able at school to start to learn trades and skills. Yeah. Why we think that all our youngsters should go to university, leave with debt wrapped round their neck, and a degree in some ology. You remember the advert, don't you? A degree in some ology that isn't helping them, that is not helping them in the workplace, I don't know. And we're for Britain not thinking of itself just as a European nation, not allowing some foreign bureaucrat to negotiate our trade deals around the world. We want Britain to be able to negotiate its own trade deals around the world. Let's become a global trading nation again, and let's re-engage with a group of countries who've got within them 2.2 billion people, where they speak English, they have common law, and they actually really rather like us. Let's re-engage with the Commonwealth at the first possible opportunity. Now, what can I offer? What can I offer you as a potential Member of Parliament for Thanet South? Well, I was first elected to the European Parliament, I have to say, much to my surprise, in June 1999. I was really very shocked. I didn't think I had a cat's chance in hell of winning, and off I went. I've been MEP for 16 years. I am not afraid of standing up and challenging authority. In fact, I'm not afraid of anybody. I will stand up and I will champion the views on for which people elect me. If I go into the House of Commons with a group of UKIP MPs, we will make sure that the big contentious issues of the day are not brushed under the carpet, they're actually brought to the fore. That is one thing I will do. Secondly, I have a track record over 16 years of doing casework for constituents. Thousands and thousands of people have written to me over the years asking for help on various things. Politicians can't wave magic wands, but what politicians can do, if they can see an injustice, where somebody's being treated badly by the local council or whatever it may be, or the local NHS or whatever it may be, what politicians can do is stand up for ordinary people. And I would argue that the stronger and the higher the profile of the politician that picks up and champions the cause of the individual, the more chance there is of officialdom cracking and doing something. Yeah. And I'm proud of the fact that over 16 years, I have in many cases been able to help people. So I've got a track record in politics. I think you know, as voters here, with me, whether you like it or not is another thing, but with me, what you see is what you get. I mean what I say what I mean, and this I hope is a straightforward approach to politics. I could not possibly fight this constituency as leader of what was decreed last Friday by Ofcom, the regulator. For the first time ever, they decreed that UKIP was now a major party. which, given that I was UKIP's first ever candidate in the Eastleigh by-election of 1994, and that I only beat Screaming Lord Sutch by 162 votes, was quite a victory. In fact, there was a time in the 90s when I was travelling around the country speaking to meeting rooms like this, often with as many as 7 or 8 people, Mr. Chairman. Anyway, if I bought them a drink first, they might stay. So for me, that was quite a victory. But I couldn't possibly be able to fight this seat effectively on my own as leader of a national party, because I'm going to be expected to go and do some big stuff on the national stage. I do very much hope that we do get leaders' debates, and I hope the broadcasters call Mr. Cameron's bluff and say these debates are going ahead, Mr. Cameron, and either the chair's empty or it's not. But the whole point about my campaign in Thanet South is that it is not my campaign in Thanet South. This is not a one-man band. You've seen tonight from our chairman and our 2 prospective councillors for this ward, what UKIP has done is now to build a team. We built a team across the country, and boy, we built a good, successful, thriving, strong team here in Thanet. This is a joint effort between 56 of these people and myself. And between us, we guarantee you that if we're successful and we're elected, I will fight in Parliament to make sure that the key national issues are addressed. And I will work with our councillors, and the more of them we have, the better. I will work with our councillors to highlight and to try and fight for some of the big key issues in this constituency, like Manston Airport. Only the other week, there was a large Boeing jet full of passengers. Do you remember? Circling the south coast for hours, jettisoning its petrol in the channel before coming in for what was a very dangerous landing at Gatwick. Had that landing gone ever so slightly wrong, Gatwick Airport could have been closed for 48 hours, with goodness knows what damage to businesses and inconvenience. And I thought then, goodness me, wouldn't Manston, given that it's the longest runway in Europe, for that? So they are the things that I want to do with my local team. 2014 was a truly astonishing year for UKIP. You know, we won the European elections. We then had 2 members of Parliament that didn't just cross the floor and defect to UKIP. They actually had the courage to resign as MPs and to say we're standing in by-elections because you, the constituents, are the boss. And I thought Carswell and Reckless doing that was actually the most honourable thing I've seen in British politics. We are not perfect, ladies and gentlemen. We will have people in UKIP who will say silly things. And the media will make great... No, I wasn't meaning you. But we will have people in UKIP who will say silly things, and the media will jump down our throats, and at the same time will ignore silly things that are said by the other parties. And I'll tell you why they'll do that, and I'll tell you why people like Mr. Gale will behave like this. Do you know why, folks? They're scared. Yes. They're scared. They know this represents the biggest political revolt of modern times. They know we're threatening their jobs, their careers, their future directorships, their future places in the House of Lords. We're the biggest threat they've seen. And we're a threat because we want change. We think things in Britain have gone wrong. Whilst the rich have got richer, actually the poor have got poorer. And those that work have seen their standard of living going down over the course of the last 10 to 15 years. We have a government that appears to be more concerned about how it looks on the international stage than it is about the welfare of its own citizens and its own communities. And I can't promise you the earth, but what I can promise you is that if I win this constituency, and if many others of us around the country for UKIP win their constituencies too, and if we hold the balance of power in Westminster, in what is very unlikely to be a parliament in which either the Tory or Labour parties have a majority. If we get ourselves into that position nationally, if we win a majority of councillors on Thanet District Council, things will change, and they will change for the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As you came in, we asked you to submit questions you had interest. I'm trying to pick the ones out that Nigel hasn't covered to an extent in what he said. So we've got one. Right, yeah, we'll take 20 or 25 minutes or so. We'll take some questions, or we'll take some from the floor if we run out of the written events, okay? The first question from Nigel. As you finished on, I'll point, thank you. I'll point about the balance of power. In the event of a hung parliament and you keep holding the balance of power with the Conservatives or whoever, how would you ensure that your own and UKIP's identities survive given what's happened to the Lib Dems?
Well, Nick Clegg appeared to be very keen to get a ministerial car as quickly as he possibly could and to break a pledge, a really firm pledge, that he'd made to the bulk of the Lib Dem voter base, which was the students in the universities. And as a result of all of that, and being in coalition, Nick has presided over a calamitous collapse in the Liberal Democrats' fortunes. Chairman, it is impossible to completely predict the future, but let me say this. There are two types of people in politics. There are those who want to be something, in terms of rank, title or position, and there are those who want to do something. And I'm in politics because I want to do something. And I'm not particularly interested in having a ministerial car. And I think for UKIP, and for trying to get change on lots of levels in Britain, actually, for us, holding the balance of power, entering a formal coalition would be a mistake. But what we could do is give support to a minority administration, to say we will approve your budget and certain vital pieces of legislation that keep you afloat and alive as a government. But we will not do a deal with anybody unless the people of this country are given a full, free and fair referendum so that we can decide who governs Britain and who governs our borders. And without that, we wouldn't cooperate with any party at all.
Okay, I think you mentioned this in passing, but we'll go back to it. I want to ask, what explicitly will UKIP do to make sure that Manston Airport reopens?
Yeah.
Well, Manston has found itself without any friends. You know, I wrote to the Junior Transport Minister, Robert Goodwill, some months ago. I got a very milky letter back, basically saying the government does not consider Manston to be within its range of options. Quite how this can be when, you know, to extend Heathrow or Gatwick, or even to contemplate the financial folly of Boris Island. He's lovely, Boris, but some of the ideas are a bit crackers, you know. You know, when actually there is something here, there is an asset and a resource here that could be used in short order. So from government, Manston has no friends. Extraordinarily, Kent County Council, where of course UKIP is now the official opposition, with 17 Kent County councillors, but Kent County Council doesn't support Manston continuing in any form as an airport, but crucially, of course, Thanet District Council, which is in a way the most important cog in all of this, has, well, in a sense, filibustered and tried to delay the inevitable, but has made it perfectly clear that under its current administration, it doesn't support Manston having any future as an airport. So Manston politically is completely and utterly without friends, but UKIP is a friend of Manston. And those arguments have been made, at the moment in vain, on Kent County Council. But if we win a majority on Thanet District Council and vote to change things and vote to do whatever it takes, actually, to secure that land and to try and give it a future as a working, operating airport, that will make a very, very big change. And you know, there's one thing I've learned about Westminster and about politics in this country. You know, I've said already that most of those that run Britain and make the big decisions don't have many principles. But the one principle they do have is they want to get re-elected next time round. And if they can see that there is a wave of support in Kent, you know, for Manston and for the jobs and the wealth that it would create for the area, maybe a signal coming from Thanet District Council, maybe an even bigger signal coming from the Kent County Council elections, which will happen a year and a half after that, maybe then we can get things changed. I'm a great believer in lobbying and campaigning and in groups standing up for what they believe in. And all the groups that have fought on behalf of Manston have done so valiantly. But the only answer, I'm afraid, folks, lies in politics. And at least with that, we're offering local people here who want Manston to continue with airport, we're offering them some hope.
Okay, the next question. As a previous Conservative supporter, and I didn't write this, I and my colleagues are concerned that if we all now vote UKIP, this will leave the door open for Labour to possibly have an outright majority, which we believe will be disastrous for Britain.
Okay, that question is a very important question because it's what David Cameron always says when he's interviewed on television. If he turns up, you know. Dave, as he likes to be called, Dave always says, in fact, Dave said in his party conference speech, he said, if you go to bed with Nigel Farage, you'll wake up with Ed Miliband. As a one-liner, it wasn't bad, I suppose. Cameron, as leader of the Conservative Party, Cameron has lost considerable support. You know, when he became leader of the party, there were 264,000 members of the Conservative Party in Britain. There are now fewer than 120,000. You know, at the last election, the Tories were scoring up near 40%. They're now scoring nearer 30%. So Cameron has lost the support of many traditional Conservatives in Britain. And yes, some of them have come to vote for UKIP. That is entirely true. But he says this in a desperate attempt to try and keep those voters that are still with him on side. He's even done a 180-degree turn on issues like Europe, where he said for years, I don't want a referendum. Having said before, I give you a cast-iron guarantee of a referendum. We keep up at the back. You know, and now he's pro a referendum again. So he'll almost say and do anything to try and hang on to his support. But that analysis of vote Conservative, vote UKIP and get Labour is now mathematically wrong. And here's why. On the day, on the 9th of September, when UKIP won the Clacton by-election, and won it by a country mile actually, there was a by-election taking place on that day in a constituency called Haywood and Middleton, on the edge of Greater Rochdale. A Labour stronghold, if ever you saw one. But a very angry local population. And why were they angry? They were angry because of the sexual grooming and rape, I'm afraid to say, of many, many young girls by one ethnic minority, and by the fact that a blind eye was turned to all of this for fear of being thought racist, and the Labour administration, frankly, were guilty for much of what happened. And as a result of this, UKIP were really on the march in that constituency. We failed by 617 votes to beat Labour in their heartland. Had we beaten Labour, Miliband would have gone as leader. So in some ways, I'm very pleased we didn't beat Labour in that by-election, because he's probably our biggest electoral asset as we come up to the 7th of May next year. He's a terribly good chap, Ed, he really is. The truth of it there were still 3,000 people who, even though they knew the Tories couldn't win, still voted Tory. The truth in Haywood and Middleton was, if you voted Tory, you got Labour. If they voted for what they believed in and voted UKIP, we would have got UKIP. And by the time we got to Rochester, Mark Reckless got 42% of the vote in that by-election. All right? The Conservative share of the vote fell by 14%. Therefore, take 14 away from 42, you get 28. So by a direct ratio of 2 to 1, our votes in Rochester did not come from the Conservative Party. Our votes in Rochester came from Old Labour. And thank you, Emily Thornberry, for putting up that tweet of the bloke with the cross of St George on the house. Because, you know, Labour think that's ghastly. We picked up votes from the Lib Dems, but fascinatingly, getting back to this question, fascinatingly, where UKIP is really scoring is we're getting votes from people who haven't voted for 20 years or have never voted in their lives, and they're coming out voting UKIP because they think we offer some positive solutions for the future of the country. The truth, sir, is if you vote UKIP in our key constituencies, you will get UKIP. And that's the message in Thanet South and many other places on May the 7th this year.
Under the present situation, and considering the remarks you made in your address, would it be worthwhile arming our policemen and women, if only to protect themselves in the present circumstances?
The one thing that is absolutely for certain is that the more you arm the police and the more you have lax gun controls, as in many American states, where you can walk into a supermarket and buy not just a handgun, but a repeating rifle, without any proof of identity, without any licensing scheme. The more guns there are around, the more they will get used, and the more people will get killed or wounded. So I do not want to routinely see our policemen and policewomen armed. I think if we do that, it'll lead to a higher incidence of use by firearms by the police, but it'll also mean many professional criminals who don't currently carry guns will start carrying guns. And I see that as a downward escalation.